All right. Well, welcome to the Aces of the Phone. My name's Miranda Martin, and I've got my training compadres on the line, Mr. Ben Miller. My name again is Miranda Martin, direct to Symmetry Financial Group under the Ryan Miller, Rob Puckett, Marshall Whalen hierarchy. Really excited, Ben. How about you?
Hey, Miranda. Yes, super excited to be doing this call with you, man. Thank you so much for the invite, and thanks to corporate for allowing us the opportunity to share some of our knowledge that we've gathered over the last 15 years of appointment setting with you guys. So I'm super excited and ready to get rocking and rolling.
Yeah, so just to give you guys a little bit of background on Ben and myself, him and I had the opportunity to work together for quite some time before coming to Symmetry. And I would think, Ben, probably about 17 years of training people that had absolutely no phone experience at all. And what we specialized in was giving them a system, probably within the first couple weeks, that had them come from having no phone experience at all to actually being like a top producing phone agent in probably about 100 different locations nationwide in our last company. So we're really excited that a lot of the stuff that we trained on there, almost 100% of it, is actually transferable to this Symmetry booking model. So we are so excited. We have kind of put our heads together and said, what did we do to help the agents here at Symmetry, and what have we been doing over these last 17 plus years that we can condense into a 3-week training to really give you guys, either who have been here a while or who have just started off, the best chance to really become an expert as quick as possible. So what we did,
Yeah.
anything you want to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would just say that, when I first got started in Symmetry, one of the things I got excited about was the fact that, you can actually outwork your skill set here, right? And in the beginning, Miranda, I don't know about you, but I was probably extremely terrified on the sales process, but I was actually quite comfortable on the appointment side. So my strategy was simple. My strategy was to make more appointments than anybody else because I needed to see more appointments to be able to get better, right? All around. Get better on the phone, get better in the home. And so in my first year, I think I ended up writing, it was just under $300,000 of annual premium. My close rate wasn't the best, but you know what I was able to do? I was able to outperform everybody else on the appointment side. So I share that story with everybody because this is where it starts, and it really starts with the mindset, but you have to understand that if we can't make appointments consistently week in and week out, and we don't hit our goals, then we're never going to get to where we want to be. And so our hope is over the next 3 weeks, we give you guys a good, strong foundation on how to be a better appointment setter and honestly, how to increase your own expectation out of yourself.
Absolutely. And Ben, you brought up a good point. Like, I know for you and myself, we didn't have really a big sales background before coming to Symmetry. We actually ran away from doing sales and kind of meeting with people as much as we could. So coming to Symmetry and both of us kind of finishing in that top percentile for our first year here was 100% to do with what we're about to teach you. The phone stuff is absolutely transferable to the in-home. We're going to give you the skills to guide the client with confidence and professionalism through the appointment setting process, and you do the same thing in the home. So really excited, guys, to dive into this for you today. This is going to be a 3-week series. Today, we're really going to dive into the introduction part of the phone script, because without getting through that first part, you're not going to get into the second part, which is the appointment process, the booking process. And then the third day, we're going to cover really go above and beyond on some different objections that we can use, and also give you some tools on how to mine the numbers that you're writing down each week of how many leads that you're taking versus appointments that you're setting, and how to use the tools that we're about to give you on how to continue to make yourself better.
John Maxwell, real quick before we get to that book, John Maxwell says that in order to be successful, you have to be intentional, right? And I think, Miranda, one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen so far with new agents is a lot of times people think they could just wing a conversation on the phone. And our hope is after today, at least, you're going to see that there is technique on the intro side of this call. And the idea is this: the further you can get through the script, the higher the chance you have of booking an appointment. So that's what we're going to be focusing on.
Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. And so when we dove in, and one of the things that was just such an integral part of being good on the phone was obviously having the right mind frame going into it. And Ben Miller and I would actually make this a mandatory requirement for our new agents to read this book within the first week and a half of them starting employment with us. And what we saw was people that didn't have at all the right attitude. We were able to develop that attitude of winning, develop that attitude of I'm going to find a way to make it happen, not hope it will happen. And so if you haven't got this book yet, I encourage you to grab it, because we're going to be working through it over the next 3 weeks. But most importantly, as you can see by the tabs on here, this has become just a resource for winning in the sales and phone process. I've got tabs here about like relationship building, how to do the cold call, how to get my head right, and it's really kind of like the Bible of booking appointments. I would say, Ben, what about you?
No, it's true, man. Because especially when it comes to phone work, it's just not the sexiest part of this business, right? There's so many things about dialing a phone that most people don't like, and what happens is we psych ourselves up. And unfortunately, a lot of times we psych ourselves in the negative aspect. Like we're dreading dialing. So we keep thinking thoughts like, oh my God, it's dial day. Or we are dreading a type of lead, or we're dreading the people that are saying no to us all the time. So our subconscious will continue to look for supporting evidence that will help, that will basically help you feel the way that you want to feel. And if your goal is to feel negative, because that's what you're feeling, your subconscious is going to find all the reasons for you to feel negative. So what this book does, and I love it, and it was perfect for us in our other business because we were hiring telemarketers. We were hiring people to make cold calls and to dial or to answer inbound calls and to book appointments. But here's the thing, how they thought about those leads before they started doing their work totally depicted or totally made whatever the result was going to be. If they were afraid of cold calls, they never did well in terms of results. If they loved inbound calls over outbound calls, they did better with inbound. So it's the psychology of thinking here, and that's why we made this book so mandatory.
So we're going to share just a couple things with you kind of as we go through the phone training this morning with you, but really the chapter 1 is really believing that you can do it. It says belief is, they trigger the mind to find out ways that you're going to make things happen. Believing that you can succeed and placing confidence in you. Sometimes one of the biggest pitfalls is I hear the word try. It says, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to try to get 15 appointments. I'm going to try to do this. Well, here's the thing. The definition of tries is expecting to fail in advance. And you're already telling your subconscious mind that you're not going to do well, you know? So we've kind of self-defeated us before we got started.
Yeah, in chapter 1, it talks about Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat, right? And it depends on how we're feeling who comes to bat for us. And so, and when I first got started dialing, Miranda, honestly, when I heard that all I had to do was book 15 appointments, Mr. Triumph was out there defending me because I knew 15 appointments was possible. I just had that belief in me because in our old business, we were booking 20, 30 appointments a week. So 15 to me was definitely something that was doable. Now, other people might come into this business, especially if they come from another insurance agency where they're only maybe booking 5 or 6 appointments and they hear 15. Now they think that's going to be hard. So in their mind, they're saying to themselves, I don't know if I can do this, but I'll give it a whirl. I'll give it a try. And by saying that, you've already defeated. You've already been defeated.
And I have in here, Ben, I have on the top of the page there about Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat. It says, is it a bad day or is it a bad attitude? And I just thought that was so good.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, no, it's basically, so jumping into the next chapter, this is something that we really wanted to hit on before we give you guys some actual meat and potatoes that you can use on the phone, because they bring up a point. It says, cure yourself of excuse-itis, the failure disease. And when I think of this, it says, study the lives of successful people and you'll discover this. All the excuses made by the mediocre fellow could but aren't made by the successful person. So what they talk about is that the excuse-itis disease falls into four different categories. The first one is health. I know for me, one of the things that I've suffered with ever since I was a young teenager is migraine headaches. So a lot of times I'd be on the phone and I would be dialing and my head would just be pounding. And the last thing I wanted to do was talk to people. So what they talk about in here is, you don't make that your excuse, because each time that you talk about something and you say it out loud, you've now embedded that thought even more into your subconscious. Even if you think it's embedded, but now that you've said it out loud, now you've put it out there. And so what they say is, obviously people go through health, but the biggest thing that you can do to win on the phone and win in sales and win just basically in life is to do your best not to talk about it. Ben, anything that you would add to the kind of that health part of it?
Yeah, I just think it's important to realize that we're not saying to ignore the fact that maybe there's an issue, right? We want you to address those health issues. But what we're saying is we don't want to dwell on that fact. And a lot of times it's so easy for us.
While we're making calls, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the truth. I mean, when we're dialing on the phone, maybe I don't really feel very well, right? I'm just not excited. I feel maybe a little bit of a stomach ache, whatever it might be. So now when I'm dialing on the phone and I'm not getting the result, it's real easy to say, hey, it's because I didn't feel very well, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to be focusing on the results. I'm focusing on the people that I'm talking to. And by the way, when I do that, I tend to forget about my illness. And suddenly, miraculously, I actually start feeling a little bit better because I'm accomplishing something.
Yeah. It says here, each time the victim makes an excuse, the excuse becomes embedded deeper within his subconsciousness. Thoughts, positive or negative, grow stronger when fertilized with constant repetition. So it says in here, so refuse to talk about it. The more you talk about an ailment, even the common cold, the worse it seems to get. So instead of complaining about, I'm not feeling good, it's far better to be glad you're healthy as you are. Just be grateful for the health, and the powerful vaccination is developing against new aches and pains. And so I love that. The second one is, I'm going to go jump. What's that?
Yeah, no, there's one other thing. How many of us feel better when we actually accomplish something? To me, that's the cure for everything. When I'm productive, even when I'm physically not feeling well, when I'm productive, I mentally feel great. And because of that, in the end, it kind of, I just feel better all the way around. So be productive as much as possible. I think that will cure the ailment.
So second one that they have in here is the intelligence. And it says in here that the thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than how much intelligence we actually have. So the thing is, it's like, man, maybe I'm not smart enough to do this, or maybe I'm not as good as Ben Miller at the phone, so I can't book appointments. It talks about basically putting in your mind, you can either use that as an excuse. So it says, remember, the thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than the intelligence that you have. And anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, when I hear you say that, you know what I think about? I think about the disease paralysis by analysis. Honestly, I do. There are people out there that just want to study. These are the people that have the biggest smarts in the world. Maybe they're the most intelligent. They have to get everything down first. But you know what? Those guys never get very far. It's the people that actually take action, right? They're thinking through the process, but while they're doing the process, they're not just thinking about the process. And I think specifically with the phone work here, Miranda, we get paralysis by analysis. We feel like we have to have everything in order for us to kind of get started. And that's true on the sales side too, right? I got to have all the agent guides memorized before I can actually start selling. And the reality is there are a lot of things you can do intentional in the very beginning, like memorize the script and memorize rebuttals. But the only way you're going to get better at that is through the action. So it just kind of made me think of paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, and the next one's age. Sometimes it's like, man, maybe I'm too old for this. Maybe I'm too young. And really, we can use it as an excuse, or we can use it as the reason too. Ben, I think we were talking earlier, and you said that you had someone that was kind of fallen into this category that you thought that this was really going to speak to.
Yeah, well, a lot of times when we start working with some older agents, in their mind, they're not technologically savvy. So when it comes to maybe the dialer of what Matt and Brad Smith are putting out, or maybe even scanning documents into the computer, they think they can't do it because they're old. So instead of working on it and getting better, they use that as the excuse. Oh, I'm too old. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Can we just fax it to you? Right? Or let me just manually dial. And I'm bringing this up for a reason, by the way. The fact is, you can only manually dial so many numbers at a time. And specifically when we're heading into this phone system here that Matt and Brad Smith are going to be sharing out with everybody, that allows us to dial more people in a shorter period of time, getting more people on the phone. And in the end, it just makes us book more appointments. So if your goal is to be efficient, get comfortable about being uncomfortable. And that includes with technology.
Awesome. So this last one, we're going to ask for some interactive interaction with you guys. So please take the question bar, the chat panel, and because I want to get you guys interact with this, because this last one I think is one that we all fall into at times and we might not even realize it. The luck excusitis. Basically what they're talking about here is they say that luck is not, hold on one second, accept the law of cause and effect. Take a second look at what appears to be someone's good luck, and you'll find that it's not luck, but preparation, planning, and success-producing thinking that preceded his good fortune. Take a second look at what appears to be someone's bad luck, and you'll discover that there are specific certain reasons that this person is not being lucky. So when we talk about luck, Ben, it's hardly a day will go by. Let's say that I'm making phone calls and then I see that you are on there and you're booking, half your people that you talk to, and I've now had to make 200 calls and I have like 3 appointments. I could say, man, I'm having a bad day. Ben Miller is killing it. It's his day today. Or, man, no one's picking up the phone, right? What did I just do by saying that? When I said no one's picking up the phone, remember we just talked a minute ago about putting those things out there, and now that's put in I'm putting that even deeper into my subconscious. So I want you guys to think for a minute about some things that you either have heard people say or that you've said yourself that could be considered luck excusitis. And I'll hand it back to you, Ben, to kind of explain a little bit more for the people that haven't read the book what we kind of mean by that.
Yeah, so it just comes down to giving ourselves an alibi, right? And it's much easier to give ourselves the alibi than realize that maybe we're not taking ownership, and the fact that we could be doing better if we just were more intentional about maybe the study habit. Do we know our script, right? I've heard agents in the very beginning, say, oh, it's the leads. That's the reason why I'm not booking as many appointments. Oh, it's just the area. I've had a lot of agents tell me about that. It's the area. Here's the thing I got to ask you. Do you really want to succeed? Right? And if you do, the question is what are you willing to do to succeed? And now that we're specifically talking about the phone here, it is actually quite simple. There's only 3 main things that you've got to do to succeed here on the phone. It's you got to memorize your script, you got to memorize your rebuttals, and you got to have massive action. You do those 3 things and you're going to win. You can't look outward. You got to look inward. I know it's easy to do because in the beginning, Miranda, you and I actually we had this pitfall. We were experts in our other field, and it was with appointment setting. So it was very common. It made sense that when we came into this business that we felt like we were already king of the hill. We knew what we were doing. But Miranda, you and I both suffered a little bit in the beginning with the learning curve because booking appointments here was not the same as booking appointments in direct buy. Right. So we had to give ourselves that learning curve, but we looked inward. We knew it wasn't the leads. We knew it wasn't the territory. We knew it wasn't the fact that it's hot out or that it's summer or that it's Christmas or that it's Valentine's Day. Like there's a lot of things you can do that can say that's the reason why we're not getting the excuse. Or that we're not getting
we've had some people chime in here, and they actually said something we had on our list, but no one's picking up the phone today. It's a holiday. Everyone's rude. No one's interested. Like, these are all things, guys, if you catch yourself thinking it or saying it, is that helping you go into the constructive pile, or are you putting the reason that you're not winning in the excuse pile? If you're not getting a lot of people picking up, I get it. That just means we got to make more phone calls. If everyone's not interested today, that means that they're not interested, or are we not being interesting? Are we not smiling? There's always, always, always a reason that we're not having the results. We just have to find it. And that's what we're going to show you guys how to do here in a minute. Ben, you had said Brian Pope made a mention on a conference call recently about the word, when someone starts a phrase with everyone or something. What was it?
It was so great. He said it a long time ago, and it just echoes in my head. He said, as soon as somebody says everyone, I stop listening, because that's not true. It's like, as soon as you hear, and we were talking about a lead source. In fact, this is, I think, in the beginning when we were developing the call-in leads. But when somebody says everyone, that's just how they're feeling. They're feeling it is everyone, but in reality, it's not everyone. And that's a huge example of maybe us being a little bit dramatic on our feelings and not taking the right approach of saying, okay, so if everyone, I'm going to kind of throw it back to you. If everyone is rude, then what can you do to prevent that from happening? Or what can you do to create less rude people? You know, let's role play a little bit. Let's see how you're coming across. How is your day going? Did you do anything to do self-development today before you started to dial? Or did you just wake up, roll out of bed, and start dialing? Like, what did you do to prepare for success?
Yeah, what did you do to gravitate those positive people in your life? You know, I think I was reading in, I can't remember what book it was now, but they said that everything that you have in your life is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So if everyone is rude, am I combative? Am I not centered? Have I, like you said, did you read? Did you go for a run around the block? Did you do things that made you be the best version of you before you picked up the phone? And if, for me, Ben, I'm just going to kind of throw a nugget out there. When everyone was rude or everyone was not interested, and I looked inward at me and I said, why is this happening? There's a reason. There's a stimulus response theory. We are the stimulus that creates the response. So write that down. We are the stimulus that creates the response. So if everyone's rude and everyone's not interesting, there's one thing that I used to find that I wasn't doing. And that number one thing was I was not smiling at the start of the phone call. And I know that sounds really simple, but I'm not joking. If you've got hung up on 10 or 15 times, are you happy? You know, if you got in a fight with your spouse or your kids, or you just didn't sleep very well, are you in a good mood? Do you smile when you're pissed off? No. So guess what we had to, Ben and I know we were huge fans of this, is put a mirror up next to you, or turn the webcam on your computer so when you're dialing you can see yourself, and make sure that when you say hello, you've got a smile. And guess what happened? As soon as I did that, and I was intentional, and I could have been in the middle of crying. Who knows what's going on in my life? You know, I'm crying when I started my phone calls, not about this, of course, but I just smiled. And then guess what happened to everyone? All of those rude people and all of those not interested people are now interested, because I chose to take accountability and figure out what I was doing wrong and fix it.
That's right. You saw the symptom. The symptom, right? The symptom is everyone is rude. And then you realize that you just got to follow the cookie crumbs and kind of figure out why everybody's rude. And we always have to start working inward. I'll tell you this, Miranda. When I first got started in Symmetry, one of the things that I had a hard time kind of focusing on was the fact that I guess I didn't understand what the right expectations were. And because I didn't understand what the right expectations were, I felt that I was doing worse than I really was. And so, and then this is what would happen for me. Because of all the work we've done on the phones, I realized that the person I'm talking to next has heard me one time. I might have given the script 1,000,000 times, but are they getting the best version of me? And if I allowed myself to get frustrated because of a simple misunderstanding of what I can expect out of the leads, which you guys are seeing here on the screen, because I didn't understand what I can expect as a result, I made myself feel worse than I really should have. And often, especially with new agents, we start them off on the bonus leads, maybe the 3As or the 4As or the 1As, it doesn't matter. Last week, Miranda, I had an agent who was dialing the 1As. She spoke to 20 people and booked 3 appointments. And she felt that she was doing terrible. She called me because we always ask her, hey, you know, after you talk to maybe 15, 20 people, call us and give us an example of maybe what's going on and how you're feeling, etc., she felt defeated. And number one, I guess if she hadn't called me, she would have felt defeated the entire day, which means her results would have definitely gotten worse. But number two, after I let her know that 3 appointments out of 20 contacts is phenomenal off of the 1As, because you should expect 1 appointment out of every 10 to 15 contacts, she suddenly felt like she was a champion. And then she went on to finish that day with 10 appointments. So all I'm saying is sometimes the way you're feeling is a simple fix. It's maybe just a simple misunderstanding, but you got to communicate. And that's the best part about this business. It's the relationship business. You got to communicate with your mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, what I would recommend is take a picture of this with your phone right now, or a screenshot of it. Because what we recommend, and this is so critical, is knowing what your goal is for yeses and nos when you're dialing. So, for example, that agent that Ben's talking to, let's say she wants to book 10 appointments, right? On those lead sources, she's probably going to need to have about 100 people say no and 10 people say yes. Okay? If we're calling on A leads, right? If we want to book 10 appointments, you know, we're going to probably have, I don't know, Ben, what we have 10 appointments, and then that means we're going to have 5 people that said no, right? So the conversions are going to feel much better when you're spending the extra money on those leads. But I know for me, when I was new, I didn't want to do that. I was kind of in here because that was where I was more comfortable while I was figuring out what I was doing. So for 10 no's, you know, on the 5A leads, now I'm looking to get 10 no's and 50 yeses. So whenever people said no, I just felt like I was closer to reaching that goal of the people that were supposed to not be a good fit for me. Does that make sense?
Oh man, this is so powerful. And guys, this goes all the way up to the leadership side. You know, as an agency owner or as somebody who's building their business, when you get somebody on board, part of your job is to help set the realistic expectations. Because if you don't do that, you're setting them up for failure. And I learned that by just by making my own mistakes. I didn't do this, even though I knew I should do this. In the beginning, I didn't. And I was finding that a lot of agents were getting frustrated over the results the first couple of days. Now, once I set the right expectation, now they look for this. And when they hit those numbers, they feel good. And because they feel good, they're giving better presentations and they're getting better. They're more open-minded. So super critical. Please know these numbers.
So what I also, guys, what we're trying to tell you too is if you're within these numbers, you're right on where you're supposed to be. So at that point, you just kind of carry on saying, you know what, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. But if you are start to get outside of these numbers, so let's say your numbers are skewed, you have 1 appointment and you've had 50 people say no and you're calling 5As or something. You know, once you start going above that average, now you've got to look inward and say, well, there's something I'm doing it's fixable. Right? And it all comes down to a science. And I had someone ask me, how do you keep your leads separated to know the type? I actually would just keep them in bucket. Like when I printed them off, I'd print my 5s and 4As off together. My A leads I kept separate. So that way I knew what lead sources I was calling. And then that way I could check my ratios by keeping track of the ones I was calling on like a tick sheet. And then take, 5 minutes at the end of the night or maybe after an hour to see what your ratios are. But if you don't print them out of opt by the lead source themselves after you've printed them, there's no way for you guys to see that on the lead unless you look them up individually, which takes a lot of time.
Yeah, but the rule of thumb, though, is this. You got to make sure you track your results regardless. Like, we don't mean track it results by lead source. That's going to happen as a default because the lead source is in opt, like what type of lead it is. What you got to do is just do the best that you can throughout the day dialing. Make sure you track your contacts, your dials, etc. And then we'll have an idea of where you stand compared where you should be, and then we kind of go from there.
And on the third class, we're going to go over kind of how to mine those numbers and how to look for trends and such. But the big thing that we want you guys to do is just start tracking it if you're not. Another recommendation that we make as a non-negotiable for our serious full-time producers is that for me to get the numbers that I did when I was in the field, I averaged about $35,000 a month in production. And the one thing that I can tell you is my non-negotiable is I always had 15 appointments per week. But even if we work out the average, That's 5 contracts a week times $1,000 APV. So really, that's about a $2,200 commission on that for the week. Obviously you're going to get paid, 75% of that up front. But as you move up the contract levels for that same amount of work, now you've made like $4,000 for the week. Just doubling that just because you've moved up the contract level there. So that's what Ben and I kind of train on, is that 15 appointment mark is really like a non-negotiable for the people that are full-time on our team.
Yeah.
Anything that you'd add to that, Ben?
Yeah, and I want to say that you can get to your 15 appointments whether you're working new leads or old leads. It's true. The only difference between the new lead and the old lead is that the old lead requires more activity. And I got to tell you this, in the very beginning, by you working the old leads, you're going to get a lot more experience because you're getting all of those, all those objections coming up. It is a little bit harder. That's why the results, maybe 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 15 will book for the 1As versus our A leads 2 out of 3, right? It is going to be more challenging, but think about it. You're working out muscles that are going to be needed in the future. If you can get really good at those old leads, quote unquote, you're going to kill it once you get to the new leads, right? Absolutely. So you can get to the 15 appointments no matter what.
So let's move in then to how to do that, the first part of this call. Now that I know that our minds are in the right spot and that we know that there's an answer to win, now let's talk about how to do that introduction. Because what we find is if we can get through this first paragraph, the first paragraph of the script, the client is qualifying you, okay? They're deciding if they want to stay on the phone with you. And then later, once we get into asking them their health questions and such, we are now qualifying them. So one of the big things that I think is super important is not only to say the script. We're going to assume at this point that all of you have your appointment setting script memorized, because I know most of you probably made dials already before, and if not, let's get that memorized, because when you have it down stone cold killer, now you can focus on how to say the words, not what to say. And you can talk about things like we call it lifing up your words. It says people go along with the fellow who believes that what he says, he says it with life. He puts vitality into speaking, whether you're talking to a garden club, a prospect, your children, and put enthusiasm behind what you say. A sermon delivered enthusiastically may be remembered for months, even years, but a sermon developed without enthusiasm will most likely be forgotten 167 hours before next Sunday rolls around. So when we're doing these phone calls, we are the stimulus that creates the response. And Jeffrey Gitomer says in his book, Red Hot Book on Selling, if they're not interested, we're not interesting.
I love that.
And and then that's where that smile comes into the start of the phone call. Some of the common pitfalls is being unprepared at the beginning of the phone call. Not really knowing who to ask for. Sometimes you don't even know what the mortgage company, so us having that highlighted and just being prepared is really important. Sometimes we use weak language, and we're going to kind of dive into this real quick. And other times we'll go up at the end of sentences and sound like we're asking a question instead of making a statement. Other times we're going to pause and actually give people a chance to hang up on us. And it really just sounds like we're unsure and we're asking for permission to keep going. So let's dive into that, Ben. I know let's talk about asking for who answers the phone. Let's talk about that.
So here's the thing, right? If you guys are taking notes, I would write this down. If man answers, ask for man. If woman answers, ask for woman. If child answers, ask for woman. So what does all that mean? Really, the simple part of it is ask for whoever answers the phone, okay? So many times do we get lost just in the hello part. We can't get past that. So if my lead says Jeff Smith, and that's the only person listed on the lead, and a woman answers the phone, and I ask for Jeff, now suddenly I'm talking to the gatekeeper. And I spend the first 2 or 3 minutes trying to identify who I am and why I'm calling, and while that person's trying to figure out whether or not they're going to hand the phone to Jeff. But in reality, that person on the phone was probably the spouse. So if I had said, "Hi, Mrs. Smith, please." Yeah, this is her. Now all of that other stuff would have been avoided. And I could have gotten to the meat and the content of why I was calling much sooner, which would have grasped her attention. And now her defense mechanism is not up. She's listening, and a higher chance for me to proceed through the intro. So the key is ask for whoever answers the phone. Miranda, anything else on that?
No, you nailed it. And guys, I know that sounds really simple, but it gets messed up. And one of the big things is you only have 3 seconds for them to decide if they want to talk to you. And that's why you've got to smile. "Hi, Ben Miller, please." Or as Casey says in his training, which I just love, he says, "Oh, hey, Ben, my name's Miranda." Don't even ask for who it is. Just say, "Hey, Ben, my name's Miranda." Everyone at these days has their cell phone mostly on these lead slips. So if a girl answers and you got the first name, just start talking to them. We don't even have to ask for anyone. And chances are 99% of the time you have who you're calling for. And I love that. And again, what I would recommend is while the phone's dialing, just take your highlighter out and highlight the mortgage company. Don't set aside unless it's not prime dial time to go ahead and highlight those leads, but you do want to know where that's listed on the mortgage company on that sheet there.
And this is where recording is going to come. Sorry, Mer.
Yeah.
This is where recording your calls are going to help too. So if you don't know if you sound credible or not, or let me not use that word. If you don't know if you sound confident or not, record your call and listen to it and tell me if you would stay on the phone with you. You know what I mean? If you're sounding like this, "Hi, Mr. Smith. Hey, Mr. Smith, this is Ben Miller, and I'm calling you in regards to your mortgage with Wells Fargo. And the reason why I'm calling is, that all that hesitation makes me feel like you're a sales guy, or you're a telemarketer, or definitely somebody I don't want to talk to. But if you come out of the box strong, confident, no hesitation, no verbal tics, knowing where you want to go, knowing what you're going to say, they're going to listen to you, just like in the home. People want to follow people who know what they're doing, right? So if I just described you a lot of hesitation in your voice, the reason why you have hesitation is because you don't have your script memorized. And you're trying to figure out what to say next. Your brain's not thinking fast enough, which is fine. That's natural. So instead of making your brain think faster, just have your brain memorize the script, and you can think just as slow as you want.
And then now we fall into the luck excusitis. Well, these leads aren't very good. I wish I had better leads today. Is it the leads, or is it the fact that we don't sound confident in our introduction? And really,
or
the only way we know the answer. What's that?
Sorry, bud. I was going to say, or the age excusitis. I'm too old to memorize the script. My brain doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah, and then that's when affirmations kick in. That's when you program your mind to say, "Yes, I can do this. Yes, I will memorize this." But guys, this stuff is so important. And what ends up happening is sometimes I could ask Ben, "Hey, did you sound confident on that call?" "Oh yeah." But what we think and what actually happens are two different things. I remember I would go listen to my own calls. Sometimes I was really frustrated and my client was being really challenging, and I wanted to know, man, did I sound as bad as I felt on that phone call? And sometimes I actually did a lot better than I felt, and you'll find too, by recording your calls, you're going to sound a lot different than you think. And that could be a good thing. And you could sound a lot better than you feel, or you could really identify some of these things we're about to talk about. One of the biggest pitfalls I see here, Ben, is a lot of times too, especially when people don't have the confidence yet, is they're going to pause by accident because they're kind of waiting to hear if the person can hear them, or they're waiting to hear if the person is interested. I don't know. But they pause at the end of sentences. And they'll say like, I'm calling about your mortgage of $250,000 with Wells Fargo Bank, and then pause. Or the Wells Fargo Bank, and pause. And as soon as you guys pause, what does that give the client a chance to do? It gives them a chance to hang up on you. Yep. Or they start asking you a question, and you don't really want any questions because during this first they are qualifying us. We've got to do this with posture. We've got to do it with not going up at the end of sentences, and we've got to do it with professionalism. So one of the things that I always coach on is I actually have, sometimes people rewrite this first paragraph altogether, and I will add in the pausing to happen 3 words into the next sentence. So it's Miranda, I'm calling you about your mortgage in the amount of $250 with Wells Fargo Bank, and I'm getting back to you, pause, about that postcard you received in the mail about your mortgage. It was you or your spouse, pause. And this is transferable with any script, right? So just add in 3 words from the next sentence and then pause. And what you're going to do is you're going to stop yourself from going, regarding your mortgage, pause. You know, if you do it as one sentence, you eliminate going up, and you also eliminate the chances of doing a death pause.
So here are some of the symptoms for you. If you don't know whether or not you have an issue with pausing, here you go. Are you getting a lot of people interrupting you during the intro part of the script, right? Are you getting a lot of objections in the beginning? I'm not saying are you getting any. Of course you're going to get some objections. But Miranda, I got to ask you, I would say by now you're probably pretty good at knowing where to pause. You know, how often do you get objections in the intro of the script? Maybe out of 10 calls that you speak to, how many of those do you think would maybe interrupt you?
Some of the people will try to interrupt me, but I will use what we're doing right below there, which is the deflection. So, you know, the most important thing is making sure you're not inviting the objections by pausing, and that's normally why that happens. But then what I'll do is I'll just use one of these down here, and instead of me trying to answer the objection, I'm going to deflect it. Because if I just said, hey, my name's Miranda, and you say I'm not interested, do you even know why I'm calling? You know? So I'm not going to go ahead and try to answer an objection to something that you don't even know what it is yet. So what we find, we'll train on this as we move through, but deflection, objection, takeaway. And the first time that a rebuttal comes up, you can just go ahead and, the first objection in sales is not the real one. They're just trying to get off the phone, or they're trying to, you know, whatever. So Ben, let's try that real quick. And if you can just speak over top of me, and I'm going to use one of these deflections down here.
Okay.
Hi, Ben Miller. My name is Miranda Martin, and I'm calling about your mortgage in the amount of $250 with Wells Fargo Bank, and I'm getting back to you about that.
So I don't have Wells Fargo anymore.
Oh, that's exactly why I'm calling, Ben. You had you or your spouse called a number and followed the prompt to answer a couple questions, so we could contact you back about your mortgage protection options. And I was actually in the middle of getting your options.
I've already looked into this before.
Oh, you know what? I'll actually get to that in just a moment here. I just had a couple questions here to get this taken care of, and then I'll verify some information and get this out to you. When you called in, you indicated, and then I'm right into my script.
And you know what's happening as the guy who's like the consumer, and I heard her answer, that's why I'm calling. She made me realize she made me think she heard me. So now I'm just waiting for her to respond, right? And then I'm still listening. That's the tricky part here, is she was able to make me realize that I was heard, but I'm still listening. And here's what happens. By her pushing through the script that way, rather than having to beat down the objection and chase it down and almost cause a fight because of it, like, for example, I don't remember doing this. We have some agents that spend 3-4 minutes, you know, I'll email it to you, I'll do this, I'll do that. But Miranda, she just says, well, you know, that's why I'm calling. And she kept on moving through the script. And the funny part is she would get past the intro and have a greater chance of booking the appointment than the person that chased down that rebuttal. We don't want to chase bones. That's basically what we're trying to say here. Not on the first objection.
Yeah, and really, you know, our confidence behind that is really important. That's why you guys knowing your scripts and having these rebuttals memorized are important, because one of the ultimate signs of confidence is smiling when you start an objection. Throughout this introduction paragraph, I also want to see, did I smile at the start? And I want to do a couple of smiles throughout it to endear the guest to stay on the phone with me. So when Ben, I knew he's going to try to get off. Most people do, because they don't know who you are, right? So I already know that he's going to throw something at me, so I'm ready, right? You got your gear on, you're ready for the game, right? So as soon as he says, hey, I want to get off the phone, I already know I'm going to use, that's exactly why I'm calling. Oh, that's exactly why I'm calling. So smile, don't pause, and then go right back to script. There's another point that came out in this book. What's that?
Yeah, you brought up something I don't want people to glaze over. You said I know they're going to want to get off the phone. And the reason why I'm highlighting that is because there are a lot of agents out there that are surprised when people are trying to get off the phone or even frustrated. And they're frustrated because they weren't prepared for it. And what Miranda was saying is you actually have to be prepared. 9 out of 10 times they're going to want to get off the phone. So rather than be caught by surprise, let's kind of be equipped with ammunition on how to defeat that. And really all she did, if you look at the simplicity of this, she used 2 rebuttals here. It's the deflection. That's why I'm calling. That's a great question. I'll get to that in a minute. If you really boil it down, do you think every one of you guys on this webinar could do that with confidence? Not just say it, but you got to do it with confidence and smile. And I bet everybody here could say yes. So she's prepared for it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I'm ready to rock, and here's something, and thanks, Ben, for pointing that out. There's something else that came up on page 175 in the book here that I just think is so perfect for this part. It says, I've got good news. It says, I've got good news. Immediately when you say, I've got good news, this person gets 100% attention from everyone present. Good news does more than get attention. Good news pleases people. Good news develops enthusiasm. So I remember, and I totally forgot about that until I reread this book when we started to plan for this call. That was another deflection. So if I said, Ben, hey, my name's Miranda, and you said I'm not interested, I go, hey, I have great news for you. I'm calling about your mortgage, and people love that. And I was like, wow, I forgot how important that was, and it was the vitality behind it. It's you're alive, you're excited. And, we don't want to be like an over-the-top, car salesman, but just being excited about, I do have good news. This is an opportunity that 9 out of 10 people are totally in a bad spot if something bad happens to them. And you're about to save them from that.
Yep. And the other thing to pay attention to, guys, is your pace, right? I mean, in the beginning, this is a common pitfall when we were at the other company, when we were training new agents. We called them agents as well. But what they would do is they would go supersonic fast in their script because they felt that the faster they would go, the less likely somebody's going to interject. So they would say, hi, my name is Ben Merrill. I'm giving you a call in regard to your mortgage with SunTrust. And when you took out your mortgage with SunTrust, and they're basically not breathing. And so I'm going to say this to you guys. This is how you know you're going too fast. If you're out of breath by the end of the paragraph, you're going too fast. In fact, I could even say if you're out of breath after a few sentences, you're going too fast. You don't have to go fast. In fact, by you going fast, it actually creates more of a non-interest because they can't understand you. People want to understand why you're calling. In fact, a lot of people would be interested if they understood why you were calling. So that's where the pausing technique that Miranda just introduced here is so vitally important. So we don't have to go fast. We just shouldn't pause at the end of a sentence because that's the natural part. That's the natural thing for us to do. What we typically do is pause at a period. And when we're communicating with someone, that's when the other person normally will interject. It's just in a typical conversation. So to prevent that, we don't pause at the period. We assume it's a run-on sentence, and then we pause the first couple of words after the first sentence, right? So knowing where to pause is critical here, and just go slow and low, relax, and just have fun with it.
Yeah, you want to be professional doctors or lawyers' office calling them. And for me, I'm a fast talker. So when I'm calling, especially older folks, if I have to talk so slow that I feel like I'm talking too slow, and typically that's a good pace. And if you speed talk, you sound like you're nervous. And so that could be another. Ben, that's a great point that you could get people not interested because you did that too. So guys, I had a couple people asking how you can record yourself. Really, the easiest way, I don't really care about what the client says. I care about what I'm saying because I can't control the client. I can control me, right? So one of my favorite things to do is just set up like an iPad next to me or a secondary recording device and just hit record and just hear, like if I'm talking to Ben right now and I got my iPad, I'm going to hear my side of the conversation. So you can just use a normal recorder for that. There are recording apps like Tape a Call, but it gives you about a 3-second delay when you attach that onto your phone call. And that kind of scares me because you only have 3 seconds to make an impression on these guys, and I don't want to waste it on connecting a recording device to that. I do know that if anyone's using an automatic dialer, there's a way for you to record it. I don't have, Ben, do you remember the name of that?
No, we'll have to.
But we can get that out.
No, but
we'll get that out.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to put them on the line here, but I think they're working on a way to get these calls recorded. So that way, not only through the dialer. So I don't think we're gonna have to worry about that.
Okay. But in the meantime, guys, I another thing I like doing is just putting the client on speakerphone for a few calls and just recording from a secondary device. You know, don't do it all the whole time, but that way at least you can test yourself on some of this stuff, and it's real simple. You can use a recorder on the computer or just something that's right next to you while you're making your dials, or Zoom. You know, go on Zoom with your upline and just kind of like you can record it through that too. So those are just some ideas. A couple things. So guys, corporate now has a version of the objections on their website. So those of you that have not seen it yet, this is where I want you to go. So if you go to the Symmetry training site, the call-in script's the one that we just had up, and then down here that says managing phone objections. So if you look at these objections, we've got the deflections that we just talked about, and then we've got the first 10 are objections that you're going to use. These are the ones you use during the first paragraph. And then after the first paragraph, you actually have to answer them or they're going to think that you're not paying attention, okay? So the top 10 that you see here are all ones that you can use in that first paragraph or before you get down to the time when you're booking the appointment. So what we're going to recommend at the end of this call is by next week, there's only 9 of them here. Oh, sorry, 10 of them. What we want you to do is have all 10 of these memorized for us by next week. That was a best practice that we found before. We would send our agents home and say, we want you to learn 2 to 3 a night. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, but just commit for 1 week to getting this stuff down, because this is now going to take you from what we say amateurs practice till they get it right and professionals practice till they never get it wrong. So that's assignment number 1. But before we kind of dive into the end of this here, Ben, I just want to talk about 3 of the most common objections that we get in the first part of the script and the mindset behind it. So you guys are going to go memorize those rebuttals, so we won't spend a ton of time reading those over, but I just want you to understand why they are important. So Ben, you want to take the top one?
Yeah, so let's first talk about the I don't remember that. That's a big one. And Miranda, you and I did a training, I think, at one of the conferences, and we actually focused a good amount of time on this concept. And I think what most people tend to do is they tend to try to get them to remember and almost argue with them, you know, because listen, here's the thing. By the time these guys called or by the time they sent in the information, we're talking it might have been maybe 2 weeks ago. Let's call it 2 weeks. And how busy are you in the 2-week period? How many things do you accomplish? How many things do you do? How many things are going through your mind? So it makes sense that when you call, right? It makes sense that when you call them, they're not going to remember, right? So instead of being surprised about it, let's be equipped on how to manage that rebuttal. And you're going to see that right here on the screen there. It says, I don't remember doing that. It's a call-in lead. That's a very specific one for the call-in lead, right? That's going to happen quite a bit. So in my opinion, again, the better approach is the deflect. I think that's going to be your best approach because it's a lot less cumbersome and you're going to be able to get through the script a little bit faster. But if it doesn't and you like this rebuttal, then memorize this one and be ready for it because you know it's going to happen. They're going to give you that rebuttal. So just be ready for it and memorize it.
Yeah, so guys, and you can actually use what we just talked about. So it says, no worries. So I don't forget doing stuff like this all the time and see him smiling because I know it, right? I'm not just reading it off the sheet. Hey, no worries, dude, and I'm smiling. I forget doing stuff like that all the time. Most of the time my significant other does things or forgets to tell me to. You know, it happens all the time. So really the important thing is that 91% of people in the country, if a family breadwinner dies or can't work to a disability, they're going to lose the home. So I'm here to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then I'll go right back to script. No pause. If I pause here, I'm giving them a chance to do what?
Jump in.
Up, right?
And that's the big thing. right? And this is what we all do. Again, this is where the recording is going to come into play. Listen to yourself as you give a rebuttal. And I want you to ask yourself if you paused. Even if it's for a second, guys, there's no reason why we should. And what I like to do, Miranda, is use a transition word in between rebuttals to get me back to the script. And maybe that transition word is now. Now you indicated that, as I said,
Good.
So
you don't pause.
Yeah, just so you don't pause.
So another one here is I'm all set or I've already met with someone. The same thing. That's great. Use that. That's perfect. That's great because, guys, not everyone has access to all the products that we have. Not everyone explains it the way that you're trained to. Not everyone's going to connect with the people the way that you have. Not everyone's in the right product for them. Sometimes these agents are captive and only have one. That's like you going into the home and only having Mutual of Omaha or UHL to share with them, and that's your only option. Just because they've met with someone or talked to someone doesn't mean it's the right fit or was the right person for them. So I encourage you to just use that enthusiasm that's great, and you can just keep going. And we've got answers for that on here too. Let's see here. I'm not interested anymore. If you don't know what to do, let's say you're just like stuck and you're like, man, I don't know what to say. Number 6 is the answer for that. Well, that's exactly why I'm calling. And you just remind them how you got in touch with them and then book them, right? So for me, when I started to get frustrated with someone or I don't know where to go, I'm just like, listen, Ben, you got this letter in the mail and you actually sent it back and requesting a quote. And it discussed either a death benefit or maybe if you got disabled, you wanted to make sure your family was okay. Statistically, 91% of the people aren't, going to lose the home if someone dies or they can't work. And I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. So what part of that on that letter there do you think stood out to you guys as a concern?
And that was non-aggressive, right? What she did is she just reminded them of what they did, and then she followed up with a question, which is the best way to regain control of the call. So now they're answering back to her, and now it's hard to be defensive about that. They're going to give you an honest answer. Well, yeah, I was just concerned about if I died, I want to make sure my wife had a place to live. And now she's got somewhere to go with that. Right now she's gotten back in, and now she's going to continue with the call.
And what might happen, Ben, is they might still be being silly. Well, I don't care. They can figure that out. And I'm like, okay, well, if something happens, like let's say if you die in a car accident tonight and you don't come home, is your family going to be okay? And if they say that most of the time that's gonna wake them up, and if it doesn't, at least you've tried at least 2 times to help get them interested. So that one right there, this is an honorable mention, But again, I really our homework assignment to you is to go through and some of these are bigger, but memorize 2 a day before next week. Sound good?
I like it.
So here's another thing. So I know we're kind of getting to the tail end. So we really, really encourage everyone to dive into this book. We're going to cover the next 2 chapters next week, chapters 3 and 4. And then we also would like you to all record at least 3 calls this weekend and play them back and look for the things that we talked about. So take a picture of this with your phone. Sounding prepared. How did you sound at the start? Were you smiling? Did you know who to ask for? Did you have death pauses? Where you took a breath at the end of a sentence and it gave the client a chance to interject. Were you going up at the end of your sentences? Did you smile when you started your objection? Did you hesitate before or after your objection? And I know that this is a lot, but this is only the first paragraph, guys. And if we can beat that first paragraph and lead them through, all the time corporate's asking us to do trainings on how to do well with all lead sources. It's not this is the answer. Right here is this. We can get fancy footwork with all this other stuff too, but guys, let's become a master at our craft. Let's master the material, let's master the way that we present it, and you guys are going to be successful with whatever leads that you get.
Got it. Miranda, thank you so much, man. You are extremely talented. And I love doing these trainings with you. And guys, if you, I tell you what, man, the next 3 weeks, these are 3 weeks heading into conference. How awesome is that? So we're going to get all of the best training possible on the phones. We're going to head into conference, get amazing 2 full days of training there. And then we're going to be able to come out and just explode. So take advantage of this. And if you have any questions, let us know.
I'm having a couple questions in the sidebar that said, where do we find these scripts? So guys, it's on the SFG Life website under the training tab, under guide scripts and more. So we've got the call-in script that we just showed you right here. That's the one we'll be using to train on this over this class. And then the rebuttals I just showed you are under managing phone objections. So when we say memorize 2 a day, write them down and put them on cue cards. You know, write them out 7 times. Right, say them out loud 7 times. You know, do it a couple times a day, because guys, the more that you've mastered these the way that they're written, you're going to do better. So get serious with that. That right there, Ben, I think was probably that, along with reading this Magic of Thinking Big book, was the reason, and the things we're going to continue to share with you, was the reason that we were able to take people with no experience and turn them into winners very quickly on the phones. And we look forward to helping you guys with that too. Just one more thing here. I'm just seeing if I have any more questions. I'm going to go ahead and throw up the one that I asked you guys to take a picture of before. I've got a couple. This one here, the lead expectations. So take a picture of this one too, so that you guys can write out what your expectations are of yourself on the phone today. And definitely, after you guys have done your recordings of yourself, I encourage you to report back to your upline on what you found on those phone calls. Our idea with this class is for you guys to become an expert at learning how to teach yourself, and then that is going to make you an expert at helping you train your growing team here at Symmetry. So we're all set, guys. Thank you so much. Everything is great and everything is awesome.